This is Up for Debate, episode number 258, recorded July 7th, 2023. Hello, everybody. Welcome to this episode of Up for Debate, the debate podcast where the two hosts agree on everything. I'm Sean Jennings, joined as always by a man who just can't get enough of our subject this summer. It was his idea, and we all have to pay the price. It's Matt Mariani. Hello, Matt.
Sean, I want you to repeat after me here. Okay? You gonna repeat after me?
Maybe.
I was a dirty bird. Matt's not grungy. He's bitchin'.
I might say your boss. I don't know.
Nope. Bitchin'. That's a word that comes up a lot in this movie. And as I was watching this movie, which we haven't introduced yet, but I was thinking about next time, like if we ever did a rewatch of this, it would be kind of fun to have like a bitchin' counter of like how many times they say the word bitchin' throughout the movie. I think that would be an interesting thing to tally. Guess that was, a popular word in the 50s. Or no, 60s. This is 62. Yeah, so
Yes.
early 60s. Yeah. But they sure do say it a lot. They say a lot of things a lot. The verbiage is going to be very, very key in this movie review. A lot of slang, a lot of catchphrases that we'll sprinkle in throughout the night. But why don't you go ahead and introduce the movie?
It sounds like you got a lot to talk about, Matt. That's very
Yeah.
exciting. If you joined us last week, we went through a list of film franchises and movie collections to watch this summer, and we ultimately settled on one that I am tentatively titling until we come up with something better: the Ford Movie Company. Because I didn't come up with anything better. All this summer, we'll be watching a series of Harrison Ford films in chronological order, and for our first outing, we watched American Graffiti, 1973's own, directed and written by George Lucas, produced by Francis Ford Coppola. And Matt, we should probably get this off our chest right away. Harrison Ford is barely in this movie.
Yes,
He has about four
we should
lines
talk
of
about that.
dialogue.
He is.
I was
He
kind
is
of annoyed that an hour plus into it, and I still was like, did I like not notice which one's Harrison Ford?
he is nominally introduced, or he is nominally in the movie, and he's not even introduced until about 30, almost exactly 30 minutes in.
Yeah.
Which I definitely did not know going into this movie. I figured he was like a important. I mean, this was his first. This was like arguably his breakout role in a film. I
Yeah, and
read,
it led directly to, if this isn't, then what
yeah,
certainly was his breakout, which was Star Wars.
sure, yeah. This was well, I think this is what introduced him to Lucas, and uh, it said on Wikipedia that he was a carpenter. He was like doing carpentry work. He was when he was called upon to play the role um, of Bob Falfa. Bob Falfa is his character in American Graffiti. He was Harrison Ford at the time was concentrating on a carpentry career. And Ford agreed to take on the role only under the condition that he would not have to cut his hair. So therefore, they made him wear a hat. He wore a Stetson, like a cowboy hat, basically, for the entire film. All about aggregate, maybe like 15 minutes that he's in the film, all put together. Maybe 20 minutes, maybe being generous, but he's really not in this movie too much. He plays, as we mentioned, Bob Falfa, who's kind of like a. He doesn't really get a lot of backstory. He's just there to
He's a
race.
guy.
He's a guy that wants to race,
He has
and
a car.
he wants to race the car, and he's been driving all over town looking for um,
John Milner, played
John
by
Milner.
Paul Lamont.
Yes, he wants to race him specifically. Um, and that's what his big motivation is. It doesn't really, I don't think a backstory or anything like that is really established. I will say though, I loved the hell out of his accent.
What was he doing?
That was it's
It
exactly the
was.
point. What was he doing?
I think the
What
cowboy hat
wasn't he
must have
doing?
like cut off some circulation in his brain or something. I don't know. It was vaguely southern, but not really.
Because I I couldn't tell if they told him he had to like have a city accent, but then they gave him the cowboy hat, and so he said like, well, maybe I'll try to put an affect on and make my character sound Texan. Only his Texan accent really sounded more like a Midwestern accent, and everything seemed to just kind of devolve into that Midwestern form, which in itself really made me enjoy the scenes he was in. I couldn't get enough of listening to him talk that way. Very very it just very, what was the word I wrote down in my notes? It was very um enchanting,
Yeah. No, he
strangely
definitely
enchanting, his
has a
accent.
screen
Yeah.
presence, no doubt about it.
Hmm. Yes. So where should we begin with our discussion about American Graffiti here, Sean? The year is 1972, but it's actually
62.
1962.
You're right.
It was filmed in 72, but it takes place in 62, or it came out in 72 rather.
Mm-hmm.
So the year is about a decade in reverse. Um, did this start Happy Days? Was this what the inspiration for
Yes.
Happy Days was? Because Happy Days came out 2 years later in 74, and it featured a lot of like the similar themes taking place in the early 60s, late 50s era, and it even had Ron Howard was in the show.
Absolutely. Actually,
Henry
more
Winkler.
American Graffiti, the failed sequel, was actually Ron Howard's last credited film role,
Hmm.
and he hasn't acted since. Yeah, no, absolutely. This film, and I at one point I was annoyed that Harrison Ford was barely in it, but then there is a lot to talk about, and it also is a pretty historical film. It's actually in the Library of Congress's National Film Registry. Um, where a number of things it did, from obviously the sort of nostalgia film. This was really one of the first to sort of do it in the style. How it was shot in more of a vaguely documentary style. The fact that it had no score and was scored entirely by popular songs. There were a lot of things this film was a first, or at least firstly popular for, and nominated for a Best Picture Oscar.
Yeah, this was I think a first role for many people that were involved. Ron Howard we talked about before. This wasn't his first role though. He was like wasn't he in like the Andy Griffith Show or something? He was like a kid actor. So he was around for a while before this, but it was also a first for I think it was a first for, I could be wrong about this, but was it Richard Dreyfuss's first movie,
It was what I
or
was
had
curious
he been
about
in
that.
stuff?
Jaws came out the year after this. So
Yeah,
this
75.
probably, and he was nominated for a Golden Globe. This was probably his first, most notable film.
Yes, I would think. I think so. I mean, just looking at his filmography, this was, yeah, definitely his first like major success or major movie that he was in. Yeah, sure. Um, so you had you had a lot of like introduction to a lot of famous folks. You had Lucas, of course, George Lucas being one of his first, if like he had made like
THX he had made before this, THX
THX 1138.
1138,
Yeah.
but this
Hmm.
was his first commercially successful film
Yes.
that he had directed, and the money made from this went directly into funding Star Wars and Indiana
Yes.
Jones after that.
Um, and you could even tell. Speaking of Star Wars, I was looking for this, and I kind of came up with a little running list here. I saw some parallels between American Graffiti and Star Wars. I wanted to see if there were any dots to connect here, just because of the Lucas connection, the Harrison Ford connection, and tell me if you noticed any more than what I have here. But it's a coming of age story. It's a story about leaving one's home to go on like to greater adventures. Albeit we don't really get to see that part, the greater adventures. This pretty much just localizes in one night. All takes place in one night and like an early morning, um, in somewhere in California. I'm going to say probably it's supposed to be like like an LA suburb, right? Like that's the
Modesto.
Modesto. Okay. Um, Other parallels, there's the adventure, so to speak, gets kicked off by a mysterious woman wearing white, right? Like in Star Wars, that you can see the influence with like Princess Leia, and the R2D2, right? The projector. And this movie, it is the woman that I think is Steve is the one that's like really. Is it Steve that's obsessed with her? Or I get these names are very. There's a remember the it's Richard Dreyfuss's character is like
Yes,
really, yeah.
Kurt.
Kurt. Okay, so Kurt is really, yeah, really upset. I think Steve is Ron Howard. That's Ron Howard's
Mm-hmm.
character. Yeah, so Kurt is like really kind of obsessed with following this lady in white and trying to woo her for the evening. We should mention, so that's kind of where my oh, and also I wrote Harrison Ford is Han Solo in both movies. He basically just plays Han Solo, which I think will be a trend this summer. I think we're going to notice a trend of Harrison Ford just playing Harrison Ford in every movie, which there's nothing wrong with that. Definitely nothing. I mean, no one can do it better than the man himself. So uh, that definitely rings true for American Graffiti. As little of it as he actually is in, he is definitely portraying Harrison Ford.
One other connection I will mention is that the yellow air speeder that Anakin and Obi-Wan use is based on John Milner's yellow coupe from the film.
Nice. So it's like poetry. It
That was
rhymes.
intentional.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we can certainly one thing that kind of struck me is how this movie doesn't really have a plot.
So interesting that you say that. I put this movie in a category, and I don't know if this category exists or not. This is a category that I call the one night odyssey.
Sure.
There's several movies that I think follow this trope or this genre. I would say it's more of like a trope. It's basically like everything is self-contained into one night. You saw this a lot in 2000s, like especially mid to late 2000s comedies. I mean, you see it with Superbad. You see it with another of Michael Cera's acting roles, Nick and Nora. Nick and Nora's Infinite Playlist follows that kind of trope, but it's like a one night adventure. You see it in like other. I'm thinking like is it Harold and Kumar Go to White Castle? I think they do this
Yeah.
too.
Oh
Like
yeah,
all the
sure.
yeah. This movie was this movie definitely would I think fit into that category. I know it's probably not the first to do this, but I think there's in this category I would also mention it kind of all takes place in one night in like
Crazy
one
night.
basic location, but it's very character driven. I would say this movie definitely holds true to that trope. It's very character driven, all mostly in one centralized location. Um, it's very reliant on its other actors and other characters to drive what kind of story there is. There really isn't much of a story other than just each of them kind of getting up to their own shenanigans and getting out of it. I think it's very very light in that regard. I mean, the most drama that happens is the culminating race, speed race that happens at the end. Um, but things are, I mean, drama or conflict appears and is very quickly resolved in these kinds
Oh
of
yeah.
movies.
Well, the other thing, you mentioned the. It sounds negative. I don't mean it that way. Simplicity of the film. Was an ultra low budget production. $777,000 was the budget. Then that's roughly equivalent to $5 million today, which is not much to make a movie. Um, and I think that actually helps the film feel smaller and more intimate because they go up and down the same street about 40 times. I mean, it wasn't expansive in
Yeah.
terms of sets and locations. Do we maybe want to go through? I think you're right. It's really a character driven more than plot driven. Do we want to go through some characters and talk about their stories as the night goes on?
Sure, yeah, we could do that. So they all meet up. First off, we're introduced to them in the diner, right? It's Mel's Diner, I think.
Mel's Drive-In, which was actually a
Hmm.
chain restaurant. Don't know if you knew that.
Hmm. I did
Um,
not.
yes,
Is it still open today? Can we get some Mel's Drive-In?
there are
Or
7 still around in northern and southern California, and there is a replica at Universal Studios based on the one in the movie
great.
that you can eat in.
I think I would like to. I'll imitate the order that what is it? I think
Terry,
is it Terry that puts it in? It's like the 2 chili cheese dogs. That like really long order with like cherry
two
cokes and
10-cent
stuff.
Cokes,
Yep. Yes. Reminded me, I haven't had a chili dog of any kind in forever,
and not
but
one in my car.
certainly not one given to me by a server on roller skates. Definitely not.
Nope.
Um,
Uh,
but
yeah, so the
yeah, these,
characters meet up at Mel's,
yep,
and it's really based around the 4 arguably main characters. You've got Steve and Kurt, who are both leaving the next day to head back east, as they say, to college on the East Coast. They'll be flying out in the morning. And then you have Terry the Toad, sort of the let's say nerd of the group, if you will, and then of course drag racing king John Milner on his yellow coupe.
yep, and they have one goal. I think with it's kind of their like you mentioned, it's their last night before kind of breaking up the group um, to go on their way to start college and their futures. And they have kind of one last hurrah in this town. And
Mm-hmm.
to them, that means chasing girls and irresponsible driving. There's a lot of irresponsible driving in this movie, Sean. What I mean by that is there's a lot of people talking and not looking at the road in this movie. Did you notice
Well,
that?
one thing I know because I it's a nostalgia film, and nostalgia is very powerful, especially because we've seen it plenty. And by the way, Grease came out not long after this one as well. But there were films in the '80s for nostalgia in the '70s, and there were films in the '90s with nostalgia for. It still happens today, although I think the time has sort of expanded a little bit. But everyone always is like, "Oh, kids today, they're so much worse than they were back then. Oh, they're in their phones. Oh, the technology and all this." It's like kids back then were bad. I mean, there were greaser gangs, and there was reckless driving, and just all around, just they were doing some bad. And what is with this town? And then this is the part where I'm like, is
Yeah.
this how realistic is this movie? So I'm not like an expert of the time, obviously, but I'm like, was that a thing where they would just get in cars and just drive around and like that was the thing? I have no reason to think that's not true.
I think it's yeah, like in any time, it's just teens looking for something to do, and cruising around town in your souped up cars is something I think kids still do today. Um, they go to a sock hop in one scene. They go to the drive-in a couple times, and they get in some fights with some greaser gangs. They go to a radio station. Yeah, there's like make out point. They find always those teenage spots where they go on the top. It's always on the top of the overlooking the town, or like just outside of the city limit, off the interstate. Yeah, so they look for those places. So what's yeah, I just wanted to point out the rampant, like, yeah, people say that kids are texting and driving, or looking at their phones and driving. These these teens had no regard. Like, they would have full on conversations between, not with people in the car that they're in, but people that are in other cars, and just kind
Well,
of
they
like
were
shouting across traffic
weaving.
at them.
They
Yeah.
would they jumped out and cut the tires on the other car while they were at a
Mhm.
light. They were
Yep.
revving their engines loudly. They were all smoking.
I mean, I think I would point to the one scene with where Harrison Ford um is talking to he's like trash talking his opponent that he's trying to race him, and he's like he's like having this full like insult battle across the way. They're like jabbing and jousting at each other's, like making fun of each other's cars and each other's clothes and everything. And I just really wanted one of them to just rear end another car while while they're like turned, while their face is kind of like in profile, like talking to the other car. I just wanted him to just smack into like a car in front. The guy to like run out and be like, "Hey, you're gonna pay for this." I mean, we do get that scene where
Yeah, that minor accident.
there is a minor accident, and then Toad. I think is it Toad who's involved in it? Is it
Yeah,
Drake?
Terry
Yeah,
the Toad. Yeah,
yeah.
who's
And he just kind of
just a hoot in this
instantly gets
movie.
out of it. Should we talk about him first?
I was rooting for him.
Hmm.
Played by the great Charles Martin Smith,
Hmm.
who you may know from films like Deep Impact, Dolphin Tale, BAFTA Award nominee,
Hmm.
um, a fantastic actor, Air Bud, which he directed,
Oh.
interestingly enough. Um, yeah, so obviously, kind of the nerd, the punk of the group. He's the one who doesn't have a car. He drives a scooter. Um, and at the outset, Steve hands the keys to him and says, "You can have it while I'm gone. I won't need it anymore." And that sets him off on a night of wild adventure with a young woman he meets named Debbie.
Yes, and that is I mentioned before. That's kind of the catalyst for this whole adventure. It kicks them off on their night. They're trying to find her. Then he gets up to some shenanigans with her. I think they find out that she is a prostitute. And he tries to leave her at one point. Then he gets scared because there's like a killer on the loose, or she's talking to him about like a murder that took place or something, and he freaks out. And then uh, yeah, it really is. It really is. There's a certain point where they all kind of like break up and like do their own separate things, and they all come back together at the end of the night. Um, but there
Yeah,
are good chunks of this movie that I just don't remember. I don't know why. It just
well, it
seems
was
like
again, it wasn't an A to B to C plot. It was a little bit
no, a
more
little hard to
scattered
follow. Yeah.
storytelling, which is fine
Hmm.
because I think, not to get to my sort of overall thoughts on it, I thought the movie did a great job at the beginning and the end with an entertaining middle where they started strong, they wrapped it up strong, and yes, the middle kind of branched out a bit, but I think all the individual bits were relatively enjoyable. Um, Again, we don't have to go through all of them. John Milner, uh, picking up 12-year-old Carol, who he drives around all night and has some fun with,
Yes. We need to
which
talk about this. We need to
very
talk
amused.
about
So
Carol.
what do you think about older men picking up young women, Matt?
We need to
What's your
talk
opinion
about
on
this.
this?
Um,
And while
no,
you're going through your opinion,
it's going to
I
be a
can hear
no.
you, but I'm going to get some water. So
It's
you
going
go off, King.
okay. It's going to be a no from me. I will quote from the Wikipedia once again that Mackenzie Phillips, who portrayed Carol, was only 12 years old at the time of filming. And under California law, producer Gary Kurtz had to become her legal guardian for the duration of filming. She couldn't even be in this movie unless the producer legally adopted her for the time being. So and in order to get the permissions for the film, I think the situations that she is put in are kind of appalling, and would definitely not be okay in 2023.
She says rape a lot.
She does.
I did notice that. And I was
Hmm.
like, again, is that like a 50s thing where people were just like, ha ha ha, ha it's a funny thing? Because I guess it happened a lot. Like, I don't, yeah, that was odd.
She's 12. I was saying as you
Yeah.
were going to get water, she's 12 years old in
Oh,
the
I
movie.
heard
The
you.
actress
I
who
heard
plays
you.
her, Mackenzie, yeah, Mackenzie Phillips is also 12, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very
So just to
strange.
reiterate, I just want to reiterate that for because some of the things that we're going to say, I want the listeners to keep in mind that she's 12 years old. She does say the word rape a lot in this movie. She is picked up by an old, as you said, an older man who is, I think he's supposed to be like 18 or 19
Probably.
in the movie, probably around that age. And he's not, to his credit, he's not pursuing her. Thankfully, he was pursuing, I think, her older sister, and her older sister like just gives her up
Yeah. It is like later.
and is basically just like, yeah, you hang out with them, it'll be fine, sure. The part that is the most uncomfortable to watch for me, though, is one of the later scenes when the guy uh it basically has had enough. John has basically just had enough, and he's like, look, like it's been building inside me like a volcano all night.
Has his bit there.
And
Yeah.
I know what he's doing. I get it. Like he's trying to use reverse psychology and have her be like creeped out by his advance, so that she'll tell him he wants her to tell him her address, so he can drop her off at home. But she won't tell him the address because she's having so much fun on this like night of debauchery and merriment. Um, but that was really uncomfortable to watch him like basically come on to this child and make advances on this kid. And then yeah, she's understandably creeped out and is like, here's my address, please drive me home, because now you've made me uncomfortable.
Yeah, she had an actual very good and entertaining and curious storyline that I think ended rather oddly.
It was interesting, and I for that moment I did enjoy the high point of their relationship to me was when he rescues her,
yeah.
right?
Well, again, another creepy moment.
Yeah, it is. But I mean, and to say that that was the high point of the whole thing still means it's not a very high point. We're still starting pretty low here on the totem pole. But yeah, he rescues her from a group of there's another guy that is like creeping on her basically, and
Yeah,
she gets mad and leaves the car because he tells his friends that he's babysitting. He's at the drive-in, and then she gets creeped on. He comes in into her rescue. Um,
yeah. Well,
and
like she did serve a very valuable story point. I think showing his paternal side, kind of the opposite of the tough guy thing. So that was a very interesting
yeah,
storyline for him.
it showed some character development. It did. I mean, for me, after that happened, I would have just had him drive her home, and maybe she would just tell him. She would have been like understandably shook up by the events. I don't think you had to have the whole like it's building inside me like a volcano kind of thing. But It was the '70s, and I guess that was what passed for humor then.
Yep.
Um, what do you think otherwise about John?
John's cool.
Hmm.
John's cool. He's a nice guy. He takes care of the young lady. He's kind of cool. I don't know if he's my favorite. He's up there. I think Ron Howard as Steve is probably my least favorite of the guys.
Yeah, I never warmed up to
He's
him.
wimpy. He's whiny.
Hmm.
He doesn't have an interesting storyline because I don't really care about that romance. I appreciated the sort of maybe calling it a twist as a stretch, but sort of the turnabout at the end. I did appreciate that, but also I was like, everyone else is off doing interesting things, and he's just moping around. So not my favorite.
No, he's the only one. I think the only character that I never fully warmed up with, or warmed up to. Kind of sad, but I also thought that in the beginning of the movie, I really liked Lori, his steady, and she was interesting to me because she was very passive aggressive in a very funny way. Like when the first scene where they're together in the car, and he says to her that basically he's seeking an open relationship. He wants to go to college and not have to worry about her at home, and he wants to he thinks that test experimenting will help the like strengthen their relationship. And he pitches this to her, and I just love that she just is like, okay, that sounds good to me. And then she immediately, when they go to the dance, she's like goes right for the she goes right for the floor with like another guy
Yeah.
immediately and throws it right back at him. But again, the movie disappointed me with her. The movie disappointed me with another character here where um they have her like kind of break down, and she goes from being like a very strong female lead to being a very like kind of passive and weak female actress. It was or a female role rather. And that was hard to watch. I didn't like. I really. I even wrote in my notes. I was like, Lori is my favorite character in this movie until that happened.
Well,
So.
she's played by the great Cindy Williams, who played
Mhm.
Shirley on Laverne and Shirley for many years. Unfortunately, actually, I believe she passed away this year.
Mm.
But I think to me, the starting point of that question of high school romance, is it real? Does it translate to real life? Is interesting. Like I think you can do. There really is something there, and I kind of wish they had explored that relationship between them more rather than just sort of the base level bickering, disagreement, let's sleep with other people kind of thing. Because you don't really see a lot of passion. Really, to me, I think the only time you see it is right after the crash, where she's in the car and you sort of see that moment, and that's not even much. So, I think a wasted opportunity with two very good actors.
No, I agree. It's yeah. I mean, it's a choice. I think they wanted to go the route where they can't live without each other, they can't bear to be apart, and like this, and then they have the conversation at the end of the movie. But I thought it would have made for a much more interesting film if they had kind of this was a little early for circumventing the trope. But if they had just kept her as that, like, yeah, all right, you want an open relationship, I'll show you what that looks like, and I'll just
Yeah.
kind of just pursue one right in your face, and just like you think you're going to be going off and doing your own thing. This is what I'm going to be up to here. Um, so, although I will say before we leave Ron Howard's Steve character, he does have perhaps my favorite line in this whole movie. And
Okay.
if you were if we could somehow, I don't know how to edit things in, but if we could put like some kind of audio clip into this podcast, it would be this, I think. When they're at the sock hop, he says to the principal is like getting in
Oh
his
yeah.
face about like dancing too close, right? And he turns to him and he says, "Go kiss a duck, Marblehead." Go kiss a duck, Marblehead. And I think that just no, his delivery of it, one of my favorite lines. My second favorite line, by the way, is spoken by the girl in white, um, when she's confronted by I guess a former lover or former client, maybe. It's She says to him, "If brains were dynamite, you couldn't blow your nose." Another great line. But so those are my top two, my two favorite lines coming in from this movie.
I might add on top of that
Hmm.
when Terry is outside of the liquor store trying to get someone to buy him liquor, and he goes up to the gentleman and he goes, "Sir, I lost my ID in a flood. I'd like to get my some old Harper hard stuff. Would you mind?" He goes, "Why, certainly. I lost my wife too. Her name wasn't ID though, and it wasn't in a flood. But I know what you're going through."
Yeah, that that reminded me of like it was like an airplane joke.
Yeah,
That was which
yeah.
I
It was
always
just a little.
appreciated.
And I
Yeah,
don't like. I did like a double take. I'm like, what?
it was like a wait a minute. Wait. Yeah, yeah. So this movie gets smart in some areas. It does. It definitely gets witty. We talked about her before, but Carol has some good witticism, good moments. When she blackmails John, basically, yeah, into not turning her into the cop. Great moment. When she gets them out of that whole like pulled over situation.
Yeah,
Uh,
they're you talk about some of the dialogue of the film. I'll just read one more here. When they toss
hmm.
the water balloon and get to the kind of car on car fight, where the girl goes, "Hey, you got a bitchin' car." He goes, "Yeah, I know." And she goes, "In fact, your car's so neat, we're going to give you our special prize. You want me to give it to you?" And he goes, "Sweetheart, if the prize is you, I'm a ready Teddy." And she goes, "Well, get bent, turkey," and throws a water balloon.
Get bent Turk. I love it. I
Just
love it.
fantastic.
Speaking of shenanigans in this movie, there's a scene where they cherry bomb a toilet. Sean, do you
Yes.
remember that? I totally forgot that was a thing. Was that a thing in your youth growing up?
No, Matt, because I went to school not in the 50s, where people were. No, so I don't think anything's ever exploded inside any school I've
I was
ever
going to
been in.
say that it wasn't a part of my youth either, but I think we might only be like one generation removed from that. That is, I mean, it's in the post 9/11 world. That's just kind of unimaginable.
Well,
Like
we're kind of in that
people
awkward
sticking
area.
explosives
Like
down toilets.
it was where we were after it was fun, but before it was terrorism.
Yeah,
We
right.
we
Yeah,
missed our
that's
opportunity.
we did. I think the 70s and 80s were probably the real golden age for cherry bombing toilets. Um, God, think about the destruction though that like the how expensive that is to. I don't know, but you see it in a lot of movies, and I assume it was a thing, and maybe in real life. I don't know. I genuinely don't
Kind of
know.
come from
Maybe
somewhere.
somebody out there can
Yeah,
talk about their. Tell us about your cherry
again,
bombing toilet experiences. Is it a thing that you did? I don't know. Maybe you don't want to admit to that. Maybe you just tell us that you watched a friend do it. You watched your friend cherry bomb a toilet. Um, One thing I also want to mention is that there's another character here we haven't talked about the enigmatic Wolfman Jack, who is a real person, a real actual radio DJ that
hmm
Lucas and some of the other film producers grew up listening to, and he was pretty active and popular at the time of setting of this movie, the early '60s. Only Wolfman Jack does not appear in the movie, does he? We get a when they finally make it to the radio station. It's revealed that it's only a recording, and that Wolfman Jack is everywhere. He's
like
kind of
Santa
serves as
Claus.
almost like a like Santa Claus, exactly. He's like an omniscient like sub narrator. He doesn't really narrate. He kind of narrates it through music, which I thought was really cool. I thought that was a really well done feature of the movie. It's like the music matched up with the action in the film. There was a lot of music. Very, we could definitely talk about the soundtrack and the choices. Very intentional, mimicking the action that we saw. And I like that it was very organic, that it came through the radio of these cars. It came through Wolfman Jack and his broadcasting. So uh, I thought that was cool. That whole thing. And then just for, the build up around like going to meet him. And I think it's who's trying to, it's Kurt.
Kurt.
Kurt's trying to
Yeah.
meet him. And he wants to read like a love message for the girl in white, and to get her to notice him and stuff. And that's when he's like, no, there's actually, Wolfman is just he's a concept.
But he
Everything's
does love popsicles. We did
he
learn
does
that the
he
fridge is
does.
busted,
That's
and
right.
they have a lot of popsicles.
A lot of
Weird.
popsicles.
Yeah, I mean, I thought the whole, again, it was very unique for this movie. Something that hadn't really been done too much before it was the fact that it was entirely scored by songs, popular songs. There was no traditional score to this film. And the fact that Wolfman Jack kind of narrates the film in a way, along with the music, is very unique. And I thought really helped the story a lot as a sort of nostalgia piece.
Yeah, you see, I mean, I think of Reservoir Dogs. I don't know if you've seen the
Yeah.
Tarantino film. That's another movie that I think definitely takes cue from American Graffiti in that regard. Um, Kind of like songs of the period songs that help to drive the action, help to drive the plot of the movie.
Do you know who the one artist who would not allow their music to be played in the film?
It would have to be Frankie, the Four Seasons guy, Frankie
Frankie
Valley.
Valli?
That's his name. Was it Frankie Valley?
No, it was Elvis Presley.
Elvis. Okay. Because I was gonna say, I think there actually is some
Yes,
Frankie
well, actually,
Valley in
they
here.
have the list of because the whole soundtrack was released.
No
Not
Elvis.
only
So
the originals, but also some of the re-recordings by Flash Cadillac and the Continental Kids, who play live at the Sock Hop. A total of 41 songs used throughout the films.
yeah, and it looks like it was his label wouldn't allow.
Yes, RCA.
Yeah. Oh, it was clearing the musical rights had cost approximately $90,000.
Yeah, they didn't
So
think they could do it.
yeah, and so therefore no money was left over for a traditional film score.
That's right.
Imagine if they had heard of a little thing called Napster.
They were just a little too early. Man, I think the other main thing we haven't talked about is Kurt's storyline.
Yeah, good old
Uh,
Kurt.
in the film, also headed out east. He's apprehensive, though he's not sure he wants to do it. He goes to this sock hop. Some shenanigans happen there, but after that, he sits on a car, which he may or may not have scratched, but he runs into a group of greasers called the Pharaohs, who sort of, for lack of a better term, kidnap him um, and make him do several tasks, including stealing coins from arcade machines and hooking a chain to a police car, um, before essentially letting him into the Pharaohs, which he doesn't really join, but he certainly gets their credit, if you will, to as a member of the gang.
Yeah, and I think when they're robbing the arcade, he runs into like his dad's friends or something, and
Mm-hmm.
like, makes for some awkwardness, I guess. Um, up to some shenanigans. That part, I think, more than a lot of the like that part reminded me the most, I think, of Superbad. It would be like something that would like happen in Superbad and then just get like really kind of ratcheted up to 11. Basically, Superbad is kind of this movie, but everything is turned up to like 11 or 12. Like here, I think it stays more or less pretty contained. Uh, and yeah. Um, anything else happen with Kurt? He
Well, you talked about him meeting Wolfman Jack.
right.
Um,
Kind of
and
he kind of
then
goes on the most like Odyssey like adventure. He meets all
he's
these
the star of
a
the
lot of
film.
ups
I
and
think
downs.
arguably
Yeah, yeah, you could
is
definitely
the
say
main
that.
character.
Hmm.
He does Wolfman Jack puts out the phone number. He does get a call on the payphone from the blonde, who doesn't reveal her identity and never meets her. And then we can talk about the end of the film, which is the characters are at the airport, and the question is, are Steve and Kurt going to go to the East Coast? But there's a bit of a twist because Steve, who was assured he was going, has decided to stay back with Lori. It's actually Kurt who was on the fence, now gets on the airplane and is headed off.
Yes, and then everything goes very well for everybody.
The most insane. Okay, so I got to be honest.
They all
I
lead great and wonderful and value and just very long lives, right?
One of the most wackadoo. Nothing in this film surprised me until the end. And I wasn't even surprised that they did like a "where are they now" thing. A lot of films did that. That's not, they didn't invent that. But the idea, the very first, the planes in the air, the very first thing is like, John Milner was killed by a drunk driver in 1964. And I'm just like, excuse me. And then the next line is, Terry was reported missing in action in Vietnam. And I'm like, what? You're, huh? What an insane thing.
So it goes from John was killed by a drunk driver in 1964. Terry is reported missing in action in Vietnam in 1965. Steve is an insurance agent in Modesto, and Kurt is a writer living in Canada. It's so. Um, I know there was another movie, Stand by Me, also did something very similar to this. I don't know if you've seen
Yeah, but I think
Stand
theirs
by
was, I
Me,
mean, there was
but
music playing during it. It was a little more like,
it
this
was
just felt really
way more.
abrupt.
It was way more tastefully handled in Stand by Me. Like because I think there was a point to it in that movie. It was
Yes.
very intentional. You know, it was like life is fleeting and can end in a moment's notice. Like you're here one day, gone the next. Like um, I think one of the deaths in that one is like a guy was like waiting online for a burger, and the guy in front of him tried to rob the burger store, and he tried to intervene and got stabbed in the neck and died. Like it was just like a commentary of like he did the right thing and still paid the ultimate price. This was just unnecessary. I don't really think you had to say anything. You could have just showed the plane flying away
Yeah.
and the credits could roll. But it made it even worse with the music. I forget what song was playing, but it was like still like one of those upbeat like happy 60s songs while it's talking about John died 2 years after this. 3 years after this, Terry died. Like
It's so
Steve is
bizarre.
an insurance agent and probably hates his life. He never left Modesto. Kurt moved to Canada. Like I don't know. It was but the fact that it was the drunk driving one coming up first, very very jarring. It was just like whoa, yeah. But that was American Graffiti.
Yes, sir, it
Um,
was released in 1973, as I mentioned, nominated for Best Picture, and a incredible box office success, one of the greatest profit to cost ratios of a motion picture ever. Um, and then by today, it's earned over $500 million in today's monies between box office grosses and home video sales. Um,
yeah,
Pretty incredible.
one of the most profitable films ever, which is understandable with given the low budget it had.
Absolutely. More American
Yeah.
Graffiti, the sequel released in 1979. The vast majority of the characters return. Actually, Richard Dreyfuss is the only principal cast member not to return. And though I won't go through the plot of the whole thing, it does actually go through Terry in Vietnam and John Milner, and it actually does tell these stories with these characters. It is not well reviewed. I believe it only has a 20% on Rotten Tomatoes, and it was a massive box office failure.
Yeah, this it would be very I think very hard to make a successful sequel to a movie like this.
It
Um,
just wholly unnecessary.
is Harrison Ford in the sequel?
He is. He is in the sequel, and that's what's interesting is in '79, post Star Wars, it was also and some several. Laverne and Shirley had been on the air, so Cindy Williams
Hmm.
was much more popular. I just think it was
Yeah,
also
this right
released.
smack in the middle of Star Wars.
Yeah, and I gotta look because the weekend it was released, it was the same weekend as Apocalypse Now and Monty Python's Life of Brian. So a tough weekend there. Just a
Really?
20% on Rotten Tomatoes for that. So not very popular. And of course, this would be, if you look at films specifically directed by George Lucas, um, he only directed a small handful of films in his career. Um, Before this, THX 1138, this, and then Star Wars, and then the three prequels. And those are the only films he's ever actually directed. Everything else he's produced, written, but just those six films.
Hmm. Sean, I think maybe we should conclude here tonight with a fun fact. I'm going to call them Ford facts.
Oh, and I've got some facts as well. So this is great. Go ahead. What do you got for us?
Good, good. Facts about the man that we are honoring this summer, Harrison Ford, with our summer of Ford. Although he was barely in this movie. My fun fact is that Harrison Ford went on tour with the Doors. Did you know this? He went on tour with the
I did
band,
not.
the Doors. He was uh, I think he like this was before he was an actor. He did like odd jobs basically, and this was at the time he was kind of doing these odd jobs around L.A. He was a cameraman, a second unit cameraman for a documentary about the Doors called Feast of Friends.
Wow.
So to make the footage for this documentary to help make the footage to film it, he shadowed the band for just over a week. He got to meet Jim Morrison, and he when the famously said that after a week and a half of a concert tour, he was one step away from joining a Jesuit monastery. I thought it was cool. I thought it was hip, but I really couldn't keep up with those guys. It was just too much.
Yeah, man had kids before he was in Hollywood. I mean, he's not the biggest party guy. That's very interesting.
Yeah.
Um,
What do you
Matt,
got for
I
us?
I have for you. There's an infamous memo associated with this on Lucasfilm stationery. The memo reads: "Herewith the suggestions from Universal for possible title for American Graffiti. Just file them away somewhere to discuss upon the completion of the film. These titles are dreadful anyway, but let's keep them for the record." And there's 60 alternative titles for this movie pitched by Universal Pictures. I won't read all of them, although I could because they're insane. You want to hear a few?
Yeah, give me like your short list.
My top here. All
Yeah.
right. In no particular order, The Young and Doomed, The
Well,
Cherry Coke. Yeah,
I think that would be fitting given what happens to them at the end and the
that. Listen, Universal knows. The Cherry Coke Summer,
Mhm.
The Fast and the
That would
Deadly.
have been a good. I like Cherry Coke
Uh,
Summer. I like that.
how about The Violent Four?
No,
Um,
what? The
yeah,
Violent Four?
Yeah, this is real. Burger City Blues, and then Make Out at Burger City.
See, that would have just been confusing. I would have been like, where are the burger? I don't think they showed a single burger the whole movie.
Buddies No More, Pals and Gals, just simply Make Out, Super Cola, The Drag Years.
All I'm hearing
Uh,
is that whoever made these titles was very horny and also very much really liked Coke. So the
make
soda. They like, yeah.
This is wild. Make Out, spelled MAKE-OUT, is actually on the list twice, which is kind of crazy. Maybe they were really pushing that. Misadventure, uh, Remember 62 is on this list twice. No More Rock, uh,
Also confusing.
The Race.
No More Rock. That would make me think. Oh, rock like the music. Okay.
I believe so.
I thought of the drugs as the first thing, but okay.
The Yesterday People, The Savage Heart, truly insane. And I'll end with Wild is the Blood. So there you go. Universal Pictures.
Summer. Cherry Coke Summer would have been a. I think that's the only one that I think would could possibly be better than American Graffiti.
American Graffiti, that was the name Lucas wanted from the total beginning inception of the film, and he fought every step of the way to keep it.
It's a decent title. It's a decent title. Cherry Coke Summer also would have been a pretty good summer, a pretty good title for the movie.
Yeah, some of these are. Although I still think The Young and the Doomed is pretty great.
Yes, The Young and the Doomed, and it's very Lucas too.
Oh yeah. Now, Matt, we've watched this film, and as we do whenever we do these series, we have to score the film on a rating scale because we're going to compare all these films against each other. Now, you can pick any scale you want, but you do have to rate this film. I don't mind going first on this first week of our Ford summer. I think I enjoyed American Graffiti. I thought it was interesting. I'm glad I watched it. I don't think I'll ever watch it again, but it was an interesting piece of Americana history captured on celluloid that I enjoyed watching. Film generally looked good, sounded good, so I enjoyed it. As a Harrison Ford film, it's NA, not applicable. It's not really a Harrison Ford film, but I enjoyed it anyway. So on a scale of 1 to 10, 10-cent cherry Cokes, I'm going to give this 8 cherry Cokes.
Nice. I did enjoy your rating scale. I'm gonna do something a little different for mine. I think when we did the Fast and Furious movies, I felt like the 1 to 10 scale was a little bit broad for
Sure.
for the movies. So for this summer, the summer of Ford, I'm going to give it a rating of between 1 and 3. 3 is so every one. 3 would be the best, 1 the worst. And right now, I'm going to need your help, John, and maybe help from the folks at home. I've come up with the name for 3. My 3 rating, which this movie is definitely not getting, but the coveted 3 rating is going to be "It Belongs in a Museum." And I just need 2 more Ford quotes to complete my rating here. So what do you think? 1. The 3 is "It Belongs in a Museum."
Here we go. Top 10 Harrison Ford lines. Laugh it up, fuzzball.
That's okay. Laugh it up, fuzzball is going to be a number 1 rating, I think. No, maybe I'll make that a 2. There's got to be something. Fuzzball, classic.
I'll have to keep looking here to see if anything comes up because he's in a lot of Never Tell Me the Odds.
Okay. I might workshop this before the next episode, but Um,
I think I Have a Bad Feeling About
I'm
This might
gonna.
be your one.
I have a yeah. That's a good one too. That's yeah. I like that. I have a bad feeling about this. I also saw there was a quote I think it's from Kingdom of the Crystal Skull where he says it's not the years, honey, it's the mileage.
Sure.
I'm gonna go with I have a bad feeling about this. I have a bad feeling about this.
You know, and
That's
also
gonna be my
another
one. Laugh It Up, Fuzzball is
is
two,
two.
and then It Belongs in a Museum is three.
And then I might give
So
you one for a
I'm
zero. If we get a Harrison Ford movie
yeah,
so bad, I'm in it for the money.
okay. I'm not in it. Yeah, I'm not in this for your revolution, right? He says something like that
Yes.
in Star
Yes.
Wars. Yeah,
Anyway, I think that's great, Matt. So where
yep.
do you rate this one?
This movie definitely, I think it's a solid laugh it up fuzzball. It's a solid two on the Harrison
An enjoyable film.
Ford scale here. If we want to even go higher than three, maybe we'll call that a Harrison four. I don't know. We
Mm,
might have a Harrison four on here. Harrison four. All right. But this is a
awesome.
laugh it up fuzzball. This is it was an enjoyable movie. I'm glad that I saw it. Had many flaws, but for all its flaws, I genuinely liked it. And I can understand how it is, you know, considered a critical piece of film as it is. It's kind of held up to a very high standard and well deserved.
Well, and this means, Matt, we have now talked about 1/3 of all George Lucas directed films on this show. So think about that.
Wow, we might have to come up with a Lucas scale,
Well, it's if we just
or
watch
we
the
might have
three
to have him on the
prequels, we'll get
show.
a lot of the way there.
Maybe we'll just have him on the show. Maybe we'll just do a big Lucas based series. We'll just finish it off, and he can come on here and talk to us about all his movie making shenanigans. Think that'll happen,
Um,
Sean? You think we can get
100%.
Lucas?
He's got nothing to do. What
Yeah,
does he do? Building a museum? He's got nothing to do.
he could come on and he could
Um,
help us rename the show
do
because
we need a
he
new
was so
name?
good at cherry. I think we should call ourselves Cherry Coke Summer. I
Okay,
think that should just
that
be
would
the
be
name of our
fun.
podcast.
Should that be the name?
Cherry
Should that
Coke
be the
Summer.
name of the series this summer? Cherry Coke Summer with John and Matt.
Cherry Coke Summer, starring Harrison
Harrison
Ford,
Ford.
with Sean
Perfect.
and Matt.
With Sean and Matt.
And you can
Parentheses with Sean and
make
Matt.
a little graphic of like Harrison Ford drinking a cherry Coke. It might get
This
the
markets
attention of
itself.
his agent, and then maybe he'll appear on our show, or he'll sue us for defamation.
Yeah, well, listen, he's
Either
doing.
one or the other will be on the Wikipedia page.
Listen, it's a win, win, win. And Matt, I'm excited because we've
Mhm.
gotten through our first film here of Cherry Coke Summer, but next week we have what may be the wackiest movie in our whole film lineup. For
Yes.
some reason, we'll be watching 1979's The Frisco Kid, starring Gene Wilder and, of course, Harrison Ford. Matt, this thing looks insane, and I'm concerned it's not very good.
I okay. So I will preface this. This is the only movie on the list that I've actually seen already. So I think you're gonna be pleasantly surprised. That's
I'm
my
going in with an
prediction.
open mind,
My
so
prediction. I think you're gonna be pleasantly surprised. I watched it a couple years ago, and you really can't go wrong with Gene Wilder, right? Like I don't think he's been in a bad movie. I don't think the universe would allow it. So
listen, you had me at Jewish Western. I'm very excited. So come back next week. We'll be watching The Frisco Kid, but until then, we're out of time. So we're going to wrap it up here. Be sure to go to our website, upfordebate.tv, for links to all our episodes, and make sure you subscribe to the show wherever you get podcasts so you're getting all these movie talks as they're coming out week by week. You can get wherever you get podcasts. You can also contact us at Up for Debate TV on Twitter, email us upfordebatetv@gmail.com. That's going to do it for us, though. So we appreciate y'all being here. On behalf of Matt, I'm Sean, and we'll see you next time for another fantastic episode of Up for Debate.